play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Welcome to Tattoo Tabletop. My name is James, and today we're breaking down my GT results. As you can probably surmise from that intro there, it did not go well. Long story short, I went 1-4, and in my humble opinion, I really went 0-5 because my one win that I did have, my opponent actually had to leave, so technically I got the win. I don't really count that, but we're gonna break down the results. We're gonna break down what I found. Again, I knew what I was doing going into this GT. I was bringing a different list, trying something interesting. It was a bad idea. It did not work, especially for Fyreslayers. It just, nope, zilch. I performed very poorly. I am not an indictment on the army, I don't think. I've seen some people who have gone 4-1 with Fyreslayers. I am really curious to see how they're doing it. I'm sure I could look at the list, but we'll get to it. So let's just drop right into it and start with battle round number 1. So round 1, I went into Ogre Maw Tribes. Now, the player, Aaron, in question, great player, very fun person, also had a very, very messed up back. Appreciate him for sticking through it. He actually played all of his games and he did very well. Ogre Maw Tribes is meat. It is meat, there was plenty of times where he was like, oh, okay, so no save, how much damage? And then I'd be like, oh, this much, and he'd remove an ogre and then put one down to 2 wounds or 3 wounds. So the amount of damage that was kicking out, basically the way it started is turn 1, he gave it to me. I ran all my Fyreslayers up onto the objectives, and then, okay, here, sees the center battle tactic, thumbs up, here we go, ran, did whatever, and then it was just, I went to his turn, and I'm like, okay, I'm popping the rune, if you charge me, I strike first. And he's like, cool, I don't care. Sprinted into me, I did all my swings, I did some damage, but Ogre Maw Tribes is hard to cut through, and even the Ogre Maw Tribes players that we do have in our community admit that they are absolutely going to get touched, whether it's in terms of points or rules, probably more so points. Chewing through that much on Ogre Maw Tribes is incredibly difficult. If you're just running a ton of gluttons, it's really hard to get rid of. Even if you get rid of the saves, you put in mortals. So long story short, that one ended 47-13, losing me. Play stupid games, get stupid prizes. I made a pretty poor list. I thought it might be interesting to try out, see how it feels. Maybe a GT was not the place to test it out, but still a great game, still a great opponent. Had a lot of fun. We were off that one and we're like, all right, on to the next one. Next matchup, I went into Slaves to Darkness. Now, this one was going to be an interesting one. It had Be'lakor, it had 2 10 blocks of Chosen, it had a War Shrine. It was a very interesting list by my opponent Carl. Carl was also a very fun opponent. We had a really good conversation there. This is one aspect where Fyreslayers absolutely struggles. When you have Chosen at 3 wounds a pop, 3 up save, they're hitting on 3s, -1, 2 damage, but crit mortals. They are absolutely going to take the punishment and they are going to give more punishment in return, especially for Fyreslayers that have absolutely no save to speak of. That was the hardest part about all these games. If I'm gonna, jump a little bit ahead to preface some of my thoughts. I know they're half-naked dwarf people, but even with the ward present, they just get chewed through like nobody's business. I've got a pretty decent advantage to say that I think if you threw the amount of ghouls that you would throw into, I usually would run a 40 block of ghouls. If I did a reinforced unit of ghouls versus a reinforced unit of Fyreslayers, even if the Fyreslayers charged, with their twin Volkite axes and were rolling there, I have a feeling that the ghouls would survive a lot more and the Fyreslayers would take a lot more. I have to roll it out, but I just was not able to carve through the mortals, and because we were playing the I can't actually remember the battle plan, but it's one where the underdog gets to remove objectives. I started removing his, and that was my fault. I probably should have left his in some way, shape, or form because it just pushed him further into me. I got absolutely wrecked. I couldn't break through combats. I couldn't rally. I didn't use rally once in this entire tournament, and it's because I never was able to clear the thing I was in combat with, which did not feel great. But again, great game, great opponent. And we ended that one at 44-10. Again, my list, poor, wasn't achieving battle tactics. Even some of the ones where it's like slay this, kill this, nothing was carving through. But I also had the benefit, I did have great opponents. So that just goes without saying. That's fantastic. Helps the game, forces me to have to play better. And so we went on to the third one after that to wrap up day one. All right, last game. We're not going to talk much about this because, again, my opponent had to leave. So I technically won. But basically, Sons of Bahamut, he charged into me. I propped the strike first rune. You know how this goes. Pretty much the way that my games were working is I was just taking my Fyreslayers. If I was given the turn first, I'd run them up to the objectives, run them as far as I could, maybe even auto-advance them. Got to their turn, and I'd pop the strike first rune, so that way they had to run into me, and then I had to smack back. Maybe that's not the play. I'm not sure. I thought it seemed like a good idea at the time, but I also, in my opinion, went 0-5. So that maybe not the foremost authority, nor that have I ever pretended to be. So I'm not even going to talk about the points. I don't consider it a win. He had to leave very shortly after we maybe got through a round or so, and then he headed out. So we ended day 1-2, but 0-3 in my opinion. I think if we would have played it out, I still think I would have lost, if I'm being completely honest. Gargants is a hard matchup, man. I had an exile on the list to do, the big 4-up. The thing that probably hurts with that is the fact that you're choosing to do that instead of fighting. So you have to choose to do that ability, and you do that instead of the fighting, which is not great. Doesn't hold up. Can do a ton of damage in terms of that regard, but you've got to have something else to follow up with it, because I can guarantee you the next move is the Gargant's going to look down at that and just squish him. Just done. Completely outdone. Just immediately destroyed. We moved on to day 2 for our last 2 games of this GT to see how we panned out. Day 2, we tried to come into this from a fresh start. We're like, okay, we've learned some things, like putting our Berserker with our Hearthguard Berserkers with, our Rune Father on Magmadroth, because that's how they're going to get their extra attack there is, they're going to be next to a damaged hero, which is going to be the Rune Father because he's more likely to survive. That was kind of the hardest part with a lot of that. Again, prefacing some thoughts in the future. But Fyreslayers heroes do not live. They do not. With a 6-up ward and 5-up saves across the board, they get deleted immediately. It doesn't matter if you're running them into something or if someone's running them into, they can get taken out so easily. They have so little durability and staying power, and there's only so many ways to improve their wards, and even improving their wards to a 5-up is really not going to get you through anywhere. All they need to do is at least do 7 or 8 damage, and there's a decent chance that you're going to miss a bulk of your ward saves, and you're going down. It's just happening. When you're relying on those tech pieces to really boost your army, to really help your army out and still be present to fight, goose egg. They just really did not do much. And we went into the Stormcast. Was my opponent for round 4. And he pretty much had like a Skaven Tide box plus a few things, plus some plus some Vindicators and stuff like that. He moved his way right up to the board very quickly. It was actually pretty aggressive for the Stormcast. He dropped his Annihilators right away. Did some Mortals, charged. I cleared some units out. I actually managed to kill a decent amount, but I went to Yndrasta and I was going for Slay the Tyrant. She had already taken a wound, so I was like, okay, I've got 20 Hearthguard Berserkers or Volkite Berserkers with the Slink Shields into them. That's a ton of attacks. There's no way Yndrasta lives through that. And she did. That was with the +1 to hit from the Rune Father. She lived. I couldn't get any of the battle tactics. I couldn't take the flanks because I got locked into combat again. I couldn't clear the things out of combat. Big swing and a miss. So yeah, it just goes to show. But this game was significantly closer. I started to come back at the end, but because I had missed my battle tactics for the first couple rounds, it really set me back. And it was a 38-36 loss. So much closer, but still kind of a rough fight. As a whole, again, Stormcast do have 3-up saves, usually across the board. It makes them very beefy, it makes them very strong, hard to remove. There were a few times where I was able to pop off the right runes, get the right abilities, and actually push through, including my Flamekeeper actually doing the first time ever giving +1 damage. And that was even the bigger killer. It's I threw like 15 of my Volkite Berserkers with Sling Shields into Yndrasta, and they had +1 damage, and they had -1 to be wounded, and they still couldn't kill her. It hurt. It hurt. I did bad dice rolls, whatever. It was one of those moments where you really just kind of sit there for a second. You're like, why do I do this to myself? You know, I could be maybe just slightly less. Again, Trenton was my opponent. Stormcast Eternals, great game, fun game. We're on to the last game to wrap up the entire GT. Last fight, round 5, was against Travis and Fyreslayers. It was me and the Fyreslayers opponent, the only other Fyreslayers player at our team at the event, and that was a ton of fun. We both were just like, we're just gonna full send this. This is how we go out, and no matter what happens today, no matter what happens in this battle round, Fyreslayers are the ones that win. So that was awesome, and it was a great way to wrap up the event. And there was one great moment where, ironically, I scored pretty decently, and I played, admittedly, like a total idiot. Literally, he moved all of his stuff up. He took turn 1, ran up, and I thought, you know what would be funny? What if I did attack on 2 fronts, and I just sprinted this Berserker straight into his big block, and I did this, and I did this, and I did it, and he pop strike first. I lost a lot, but somehow my Grimwrath Berserker going into a 20 block of Volkites with Fire Steel Axes. He lived with 1 wound. I don't know how, I don't know why, but he did. And I popped his Draught, so he had 8 attacks. I did fight twice, my once per battle fight twice. Killed like 8 or 9 of the 20. I was like, did I actually just get my attack on 2 fronts for running my 2 big units into just absolute nothingness? Like, this is so stupid. So I got the battle tactic. We actually scored pretty decently. Again, it was a fun game. It played like an absolute madman. But here's where I think there's an indictment to be said against the Fyreslayers. So Travis, we were both playing, like, we were having a lot of fun playing the game. Travis was still making very tactical decisions with the Fyreslayers. He was popping the runes at the right time. He was moving them with enough board presence. He had a lot of bodies. He had like 80 Fyreslayers running around all over the board, and somehow, even with me playing complete no-brain mode, full sending everything, even when you shouldn't, I still killed a lot of his army. At the end of it, the only things that were even remotely left was a block of Fyreslayers that were a block of, like, I think it was 15 by the end of it, 10 to 15, and that was it. I had killed everything else with heroes, buffs, whatever. That's not how that should be. He was playing a very good tactical game. If there was someone watching the game, they would realize, they would have seen that he was making smart decisions, taking the right objectives, making the right runes, popping off the right benefits. He was doing the right stuff, so it was weird for someone like me who was giving this no tactical thought whatsoever and just sending everything in for one glorious fight, was killing a lot of his stuff. That just didn't feel good. In a discussion about the Fyreslayers, that doesn't feel good. If your opponent is just, if I'm no-braining myself and just sending everything in, your Fyreslayers, your tactical decisions shouldn't be backpedaling so aggressively. I think there's something within Fyreslayers. I'm not sure what needs to change. I'm gonna be honest. Let's just transition into this. So end game for that one was 40 to 20. I lost. I deserved to lose, but for that loss, I killed a lot of his stuff, an absurd amount of his stuff. And if I had been just a little bit more tactical, there's a chance that I could have switched, and that's not good. If we're gonna get into this final discussion, thoughts on Fyreslayers. I still like the gameplay in terms of, you know, how they move, their unit sizes, stuff like that. I think that's fine. I think some stats need to change somewhere. I know they're half-naked dwarves, but 6-ups is not good. I appreciate the wards across the entire army. That definitely helps. But I will say, one major change, you know, if you're looking at the Runefather on Magmadroth, I didn't pop a single thing of Volcanic Blood. Before, that was a huge mechanic for the Fyreslayers, was you were throwing in your Magmadroths, and every time you were taking damage, you were rolling dice and potentially bleeding wounds onto something because you have the lava blood. It's now changed to, if you roll a save roll of 1, never happened. Not even a once. Every damage I took was 2s, 3s, or maybe I missed 1 or 2, but the Volcanic Blood is an absolute 0. It does absolutely nothing, or it did absolutely nothing. I think it's something that maybe Penn's revisiting, going back to the original way it used to work, because the other problem too is for a Fyreslayer like a Runefather on a Megadroth, who's, when you look at the profile, like stat-wise, should be really punching hard. He really wasn't. I never was able to get him out of combat. He was, even when I was sending him into engagements that he should have very clearly won, there were a lot of times where he wasn't carving through, he wasn't getting the damage out that he needed to, and just felt bad, man. Like, it did not feel good. I had gotten him in a couple games again. My list was unoptimized, but the way stuff was just disappearing for Fyreslayers did not feel good. Its runes are still very important. I think that they still have a very important role, but there were times where the runes would screw you. For example, your strike first rune is on any turn, but let's say you go first, or you go second in the first battle round. Well, you pop that rune on their turn to, if you charge me, you strike first. Like, I get strike first because you're trying to keep yourself safe in the event that they do have an ability to reach you where you deployed and everything. Then you get to your turn on round 1, and you're still stuck with that rune. That does absolutely nothing for you. It almost incentivizes you to not go onto objectives, to not fight, because you for sure are not going to be able to clear it with whatever you're sending in, unless you're sending in a hefty unit of Berserkers that's actually going to have their buffs, that's going to be able to pop their stuff. It really puts you in a bad spot because it's for the entire battle round. So I understand it can keep you safe from like counter charges as well, but at that point your opponent doesn't care. They're not going to counter charge because all their stuff is on their objectives. They're not going to charge you. They're waiting for you to charge them. Puts you in a bad spot. So I feel like at least for 1 and 2 of them, if they change like the strike first rune to for the rest of the turn, I think that could be beneficial, just in terms of then you could take that, you could use that strike first rune, and then on your turn, then you're like, okay, now I'm popping crit mortals because that's how I'm going to get my damage through. That's how I'm going to try, or hopefully get my damage through, and that's going to move that better. And then you're just sacrificing not having a rune for a battle round. I would much rather sacrifice a rune, like not having a rune for a later battle round, and actually being able to accomplish what I want to with the Fyreslayers. Yeah, I don't know what the fix is. Right now, there are a few channels that have been covering the stats. I know the Honest Wargamer has been covering the stats, so if you want to, you definitely go check his stuff out. I would highly recommend it. He's a very involved, very great commentator on the Age of Sigmar experience. As a whole, the stats are there that are showing that Fyreslayers are not doing great. There's been a couple that have placed decently. I don't think Fyreslayers have taken a GT yet, that I'm aware of, unless there's one hiding somewhere. I'm not sure what the play is, but really hoping that the book for the Fyreslayers really gives them a ramp up. I think in the meantime, the faction pack can do some fun stuff, but you're going to have some matchups that are absolutely going to counter you, that are absolutely going to drop models like nobody's business, no amount of your wards or anything. And even one of the rules that I 100% got wrong, which was the Runefather rule, which was, I thought, gave him and his retinue a 4 ward. It does not. It just gives him a ward and gives them a +1 to hit. Even with that, and me misplaying that massive rule, I was still getting my teeth kicked in, which is not good at all. I mean, granted, like I said, I am not the definitive person to go to for critical and tactical feedback on an army, but as someone who's played a lot of Age of Sigmar, who's played a lot of 40k, who's played a lot of these games, there is definitely some aspects that are missing in the Fyreslayer side of things that are easily countered with what I would consider is going to be a competitive build for the Grand Tournament. There's going to be more than enough stuff. I mean, I fortunately didn't have to go into Lumineth, but Lumineth would wreck me. They're seen as their little kangaroos, they're wind riders, I think is what they're called. Shoot things and then remove the wards. With a 6-up save, I'm not getting a save at all, and I'm not getting wards, and that's just damage straight through. It's just immediately picking up models left, right, and center, and no amount of rallying is going to help me because it's going to immediately just backpedal again. It's a rough fight. It's a rough thing. All in all, I might be shifting armies. I know, crazy. Seeing as I went from my Flesh Eater courts at the RTT to the Fyreslayers at the GT here, but here's hoping in the future the Fyreslayers do get a touch up. I'm still planning on doing some more stuff with the Flesh Eater Courts because I still just very much enjoy death, but there's also a chance I might take a look at some Bone Reapers. I always liked the Bone Reapers. I've had them built up for a while. I've actually had them painted for a while. It might be a fun time to, maybe mess around with that a little bit, maybe some Stormcast. I don't know. Again, 4th edition is still very, very new. We had a slight mini errata that really didn't do much, changed a couple things, clarified a few things. The Fyreslayers in that case, it literally just cleared up that you declared your run and charge rune in the movement phase now instead of the charge phase, because your rune master had an ability to boost your rune to give you +1 to run and +1 to charge, and you couldn't do that before because it was in the charge phase. So yeah, it was just a clarification. But all in all, again, still a great time, still a fun time at the GT. It's always looking forward to the next game, always with the next gameplay, what I'm thinking. So here's hoping, but again, let me know what you think down in the comments down below. If you have seen any good Fyreslayers lists that really stand out, leave those down in the comments below. I would love to hear them. Who knows? We'll find out later, but until next time, I've been Tattooed Tabletop. Go paint something.